Hi, my name is Katie Marshall, and I'm here to talk with you about the likelihood of success, the impact of failure, and what you can do to mitigate. And we're going to talk about those three things based on my FaceTime interview with Beth Harrington. Beth Harrington has 10 years of project management experience under her belt. She has worked at Volvo Trucks, Tesla, and now currently works in project management at Plenty, which is a startup in San Francisco focused on vertical farming. She's basically saving the world as she changes the way we all access and farm our own food. She's been a project manager, a chief project manager, and an engineer. And you'll see throughout the information that I share with you all that she has the project management mind and skill set, as well as this engineering inside operating. Beth got her MBA from Wake Forest University on top of her master's in mechanical engineering from NC State and also her bachelor's in mechanical engineering from NC State. So yes, she is a member of the Wolfpack. And she would never say this, but I will. She's kind of a big deal. With all of her experiential learning on project management, as well as her education, at this point, as she says, her brain just works in project management. As she says, I'm always thinking about a process or a timeline to do something. She learned immediately when her manager started giving her project work without even telling her that she was going to be a project manager. She learned along the way and then picked up more through education, and now she is where she is today, working in multiple startups, changing the world, and utilizing project management in all areas of her life. Whether it's planning a trip to South Africa and going on a safari, or doing a road trip up the coast of California, or just her regular life, planning out ultimate Frisbee games, hanging out with friends, and seeing her family, Beth is constantly managing the project that is herself. And I know that for a fact because we've known each other for about 5 years. Beth and I worked together at Volvo, where we created the Early Career Professionals Network, a young professionals employee resource group where people in the company could come for developmental events, networking events, and to meet mentors and sponsors. She and I worked hand in hand in the trenches to build this thing. And as we worked together, I got to witness her being a project manager in everything that she did. A lot of the backbone of the success of that organization came from her ability to set a timeline to get us all on the same page and to mitigate risk in conversation as she worked out the budget and also who all would attend. Beth has such a plethora of wealth, a depth of knowledge in project management, and I am delighted to share with you both what I learned with her in our FaceTime interview for this project, as well as what I got to see with her while experiencing it next to her. Two major project concepts that she came up with, two major project management concepts that came from our conversation are communication and risk management. These are the two elements of project management that if you don't have them, you notice it immediately. But if they're going well, it's hard to spot because you're just using them on top of everything else and all of your tools. So let's pull these out into light. Let's give them the knowledge and the respect they deserve. When it comes to communication, Beth offered a couple different ideas. The first is that a project manager's role is to facilitate multiple viewpoints, even if it's uncomfortable, maybe especially if it's uncomfortable. We know that conflict is going to arise in a project management discussion, in a project team work environment. There's going to be conflict. And the ability to facilitate conversation is a skill that Beth couldn't hone in on enough. She said that one of the ways that she works through this is to acknowledge when people say things. So I heard you say this, I heard you say this, here's our end goal, here's some other insight, how do we put them all together? And her ability to make connections across communicators is what makes her such a successful project manager. As she said, as a communicator, you don't need all the answers. This could be something that keeps us from speaking up more often than not, is the feeling that we need to know everything. She said as a project manager, it's a lot more about the right questions that you can ask and making sure that other people get their chance to share their answers. When I asked her what advice she had for new project managers or women who are project managers in male-dominated arenas, as she has been more often than not, she said her number one piece of advice is to speak up. She said, don't self-select yourself out. Don't opt to just take the notes or sit outside of the table or not join in on the meetings. Be a little bit pushy. Speak up. Because while your job is to facilitate, you have to speak up to facilitate. She mentioned that project rooms can get noisy and raucous and be a very big cacophony of noise. But if you can speak up and facilitate those ideas, you can get the project where it needs to go. Communication is such a massive skill of Beth's. I've seen her do it. It's an amazing skill of hers, but it's also a high priority. In 2014, she was a requested speaker for the Volvo Group Talks, which is similar to TED Talks, but Volvo Group specific. She was flown out to Sweden to present in front of the corporate team and all of the people who came to the event. And what she did was speak about the importance of communication in project work. We know from our reading and our studying how valuable communication is, and a lot of the work that we did was thinking about how to communicate effectively. We feel it as a high priority as project managers, but as an engineer, communication isn't always at the forefront. There's a lot of design, there's a lot of element, there's a lot of tools, there's a lot of pieces. Beth made this revolutionary statement at our company, which was that if we're not communicating, we're losing people. And if we're losing people, we're losing time. And if we're losing time, we're losing money. She rocked it with this idea, and people were changed afterwards. Her entire engineering team operated differently after this presentation. At this point, Beth says, so much of being successful as a project manager is the soft skills. Communication is key. Her second major point, and this is one we came back to a lot as well, is risk management. As she said, it's all risk management. The entire process of being a project manager is managing the risk. She said one of the best ways to do this is determine our known knowns and our known unknowns. What do we know for sure? And what do we know that we definitely don't know for sure? And one element that she kept coming back to with risk management is the acknowledgement that there will be tension, there will be conflict, but that anxiety can be quelled and we can drain the emotion out of it if we can determine these things in a fact-based way. And the ability to drain the emotion out of it is really a combination of risk management skills and communication skills. To be able to say, here's our risk, here is what we need to get done, here's what I heard you say, here's what I heard you say, here's where we need to go. That drains the emotion out of it because people are acknowledged, the facts are on the table, and the forward motion is set. One tool that I especially wanted to share from Beth is this idea of a two-way matrix. As a project management tool, it looks a little bit like this. What's the likelihood of success? And what happens if we're not successful? She said you can also do this a little bit more pessimistically. What's the likelihood of failure? What happens if we fail? We like to stay optimistic though. So what's the likelihood of success? And then what happens if we're not successful? And in those two questions, you find your directions for the project. Played out, it looks like this. My team is ordering a piece of equipment and we need it to get it here on time. What's the likelihood we'll get it here on time? Over to the left, if it's high, we're fine. If we know the distributor, if we know our timeline, if they've given us a set date, then we're fine. But if it's low, that it gets here on time, what's the impact? Will the whole program shift? And if it does, will that be a big deal? The example she gave was when working at Tesla, she and her team were designing the T3, and they were focusing on the steering wheel. And the design team had these two different steering wheels they kept going back and forth between, and because they kept going back and forth, it started to impact the time of the project. The timeline was going to be hindered if they didn't make a choice. What Beth offered as a project manager was, why don't we have the design team make two steering wheels, one that goes this direction they're into and one that goes this direction. Both are satisfactory to our project, but whichever one hits our timeline, whichever one hits our end date is the one we'll go with. Then when the end date happened, the team decided that because of the increased success of the new steering wheel, that they were willing to wait for the one that was still in the works. And as she said, we had to wait a little bit longer. Our timeline shifted, that wasn't nearly as important to us as having such a high quality steering wheel. I believe her exact term was, it took a little bit longer, but now the T3 has a pretty rocking steering wheel because of it. This is how we order the likelihood of success matrix, the two-way matrix. What's the likelihood of success? What's the impact if we succeed? And what's the impact if we don't succeed? Beyond the tools of risk management and communication, there were two major takeaways that I got from my discussion with Beth. And these were themes that she spoke to without saying directly. The first is humility, and the second is awareness. As a project manager, some of the topics we discussed was this idea of ego. What happens when ego comes in the room when you're the project manager, or when your project manager has quite a big ego? Beth recommended that if you are the project manager, try not to let your own bias in too early. There's a high likelihood that you'll change your mind, which again, we want to be open to. And if that's the case, then we want to be open to other people sharing their ideas with us. Try not to let your own bias in too early. Because if you can stay open to changing your mind, then you can get buy-in from your stakeholders. You can get buy-in from your project team. And we know that if you get buy-in, that you're much more likely to succeed than if you just go it alone. An example that she told me about this, when she was working at Trucks, Volvo Trucks, she was working with a project manager who had a very big ego. And because of that ego, they were not open to listening, getting new ideas, retaining new information, or changing or adapting. It was their way or the highway. What was supposed to be a 3-year and $3 million project turned into a 5-year, $20 million project because of the permeation of miscommunication that happens based on one person's ego. That stubbornness is important in a project manager when it comes to completing a goal, but there must be some element of flexibility and humility and a willingness to listen and to make the project about the project team and the goal, not about what you said or what you succeeded in. I can tell you experientially what I know of Beth is that this humility courses through her veins. It's not that she makes herself lower than others or that she doesn't stand in her own strength. But when she celebrates a success, she does it by celebrating with the team. When she gets excited about what's going on, she talks about how great the project is going, how well the team is doing, what they're learning. And in that humility, she allows herself to be grateful and enthusiastic about the work that she does. And these two elements, that positivity ripples through a project. It was once said that if you want to make a change, optimism is the best way to start. And that is how she operates from an optimistic standpoint. And then she supports her optimism through that two-way matrix. What's the likelihood of success? What happens if we don't succeed? And through there builds success and encourages and acknowledges her team to keep moving forward, which gets buy-in and keeps the project going. As Beth said, know that everyone is there to do their best work. Leave ego out of it. The second element that she kept coming back to is this idea of awareness. And she said to practice listening. When people are sharing ideas in your teams, when you're working with people, even with your friends, practice actively listening. And as you do, connect the ideas together. The more you can retain from someone else, the more information you get from them, the more ideas you can connect together. And further, she said to continue learning. As I told you before, Beth is a pretty big deal. She's worked at some very impressive companies and she has several degrees. At this point, you could say easily that she doesn't have to keep reaching for more educationally, but she constantly does. She recommended that we reach for mentors and sponsors and people who are project managers who can share more with us. And she's a continual learner and that she's constantly listening to audiobooks, reading books, gaining new knowledge that she can apply to project management. And that adaptability of knowledge is another thing that creates a successful environment for her, and her impact is created more positively because of it. One thing I really loved that she said was, when it comes to project management, you're probably already doing it. What she means is, if you want to be a project manager, look at what you're already doing in your life. What kind of trips are you scheduling? What are you doing to take care of your week? What kind of work do you need to accomplish? And in that, unfold your process and see how you're already doing it. In that, she said, if you want to be a project manager, look around, look at what you're already managing and what you're already doing. And from that, gain your known knowns and then recognize your known unknowns and go forward from there. You most likely have more experience than you think. Furthermore, a major point that I took away from this was the impact of communication. Beth shared that most of the conflicts and most of the anxiety that she saw in her projects came when communication happened too late or when communication didn't happen in front of the group. So we're not just communicating as project managers, but we're doing so transparently and inclusively. We're facilitating discussion. She said that there's no need to just speak at people when you could bring people in and conduct the conversation that way. Finally, what I noticed from her was this balance, this willingness to be humble and a leader, and this willingness to see success and failure and find the happy medium of both. To know that there will be time for success, there will be time to achieve and to reach and to get more, and that there will be failure baked into project management. She mentioned that when you create a timeline, keep in mind that it will probably change, but to do it anyway and to get buy-in as you go. There's a willingness to adapt that comes with acknowledging the success and knowing failure will come, and communicating through those with humility, a willingness to speak up and an openness to be told that you're wrong, to be told that you can change, and to be told that there's something to this project that still needs to happen that hasn't yet. Of course, we don't only listen or only speak, we find that balance, and as Beth said, she found it through experience. And I can tell you from interviewing her, she knows her stuff. And with that, I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity to interview someone who has been my hero for as long as they have been my friend, and to share what I've learned with you right here. From the hearing about the two-way matrix, to hearing about the importance of communication, to knowing that it's all risk, that failure is baked in, and that we navigate it through communication and soft skills, and seeing that balance of checking your ego at the door for sake of humility and being a strong leader. For all that, I'm deeply grateful. Thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to the discussion that we have about what I learned from Beth Harrington in the likelihood of success, the impact of failure, and how to mitigate both. Thank you.